Well, all you folks that say the rules committee don't do anything, I guess you'll have to eat crow, as the rules committee went ahead and banned some pretty big players in Commander today. This announcement is wild. I did not expect it. Let's have a look at it and then unpack it for what it means for Commander and Magic. I think it's actually way bigger than just a couple of bans. I think this is actually kind of a big problem with how Wizards have been managing the forefront of Magic, which is Commander. If you want to buy any single or sealed product, you can do so from coolstuffinc.com. Link in the description below. Get 5% off your order when you use the code Kenobi, and it helps support the show. And you get one of these lovely tokens as well when you use my code at checkout. But don't buy the cards mentioned in this video, because they've been banned and they're going to plummet. To be upfront and clear about what's happened, Dockside Extortionist, Jel Lotus, Mana Crypt, and Nadu Winged Wisdom are banned. I'm going to go into the explanations a little bit, unpack them a little bit, and talk about the ramifications of banning cards that are $100 on the secondary market. One that I'm not going to talk hugely about is Nadu. If you're not aware of the Nadu problem, I covered a lot of it for how bad it was for Modern. I'll link to that in the description of this video if you want to check that out as well. This video is going to focus on the 3 big players for Commander. For those of you that don't know, at time of recording, the prices that I grabbed as the ban came through, so prices have not adjusted yet, but the cheapest copy of a Jel Lotus you can get right now is $90. Dockside Extortionist comes in at $85, and Mana Crypt's cheapest version is $194. These are not cheap playing pieces for a collectible card game. The overall explanation was this, that the philosophy of Commander prioritizes creativity, and one of the ways we have historically reflected that in the rules and ban list is to encourage a slower pace of game than traditional formats. This gives decks time and space to develop and do different things, with a goal to make it easier for players who enjoy slower, more social games to have an environment for them to explore. They acknowledge that you become the arch enemy when you have fast mana early in the game, and they go on to explain why each of these cards has been picked as things they think aren't healthy for the format anymore. Mana Crypt comes down on turn 1 for no mana. It's quite possible to have the explosive start of Mana Crypt into Signet or Talisman, land, and another Signet, leaving that player untapping with 5 mana on turn 2. Sure, this is a Christmas land, but it does happen. In games going 12 plus turns, the accumulated threat of damage from the Crypt provides a reasonable counterbalance for its explosive effect, but when you're snowballing on turn 6 to 8, it's a meaningless drawback. And you start on 40 life, so the drawback of Crypt in a game of Commander is rather minimal compared to what it would be in a 1v1 scenario. Crypt has always been incredibly, obnoxiously powerful. That's why it costs $200. I do agree that Crypt is very, very strong. I don't know if it needed to go, I guess is where I'm sat with this. Basically, I look at this ban list from today, all 4 options, and I'm like, it kind of makes sense. All of them are cards that I think will probably make the format more fun not to have to play or play against. Crypt being the less egregious of all of them, and I can't really put my finger on why. I think because it's just not as explosive as Lotus or Dockside in a 4-player game. That's probably the reason. Jel Lotus, they say, is another card that gives you 5 mana on turn 2. Jel Lotus does this without ever needing a good hand, though you're restricted in what you can do with your mana. 4 and 5 mana commanders can pick up significant punch, often draw cards to make up for the one-shot mana, and defensive abilities such as Ward can't be interacted with that early in the game. Absolute agreement here. Jel Lotus is an insane and obnoxious Magic card that I'm going to focus on heavily in the second part of this video as an example of what's going wrong with Commander and the cascading effect of wrong decision after wrong decision that gets us to today, where they're banning hundreds of dollars worth of cards out of people's collections. Dockside Extortionist isn't normally quite as explosive in the early game as the other 2 cards, so this is what they say. I would argue otherwise, but it can still go mana positive on turn 2 and start generating substantial treasures after that. It's been on the border for years, and we've shied away from taking action in the past because the card has scaled well with the power level of the table, but it's a frequent contributor to the more egregious snowballing starts. I've always held the position that Dockside Extortionist is one of the worst cards in Commander, and it doesn't matter what power level you're at, because everyone is playing enchantments and artifacts, whether they be cheap, efficient, good ones, or big, dumb ones, in every level of the game. Dockside has always been absurd when I've played it, and I've always felt guilty for playing it, and I've never been happy to see someone else casting it, because it normally just snowballs the game to a finale without much effort. It's in some ways akin to something like Paradox Engine, except it's explosive and sudden. It just does a massive thing that ends up fucking the game up. Where Engine does a thing that fucks the game up slowly, as people twiddle themselves to the point that they ejaculate. They do make a nod to the elephant in the room being Soul Ring, and how they have no desire to ban it because it's a pillar of the format, that it defies the laws of physics. Their words, not mine. And ultimately, this is a point that I'm not going to labor too much, because I know a lot of people are angry about this and think Sol Ring should go as well. Like, you know, be consistent is what people are saying. But this is a 100-card singleton format. So I think actually being consistent is less needed. You can ban down the number of fast mana, including the most egregious examples of it, like a Lotus and like a fucking Mana Crypt, and you reduce down the number of explosive starts that will happen. You're not going to get a Crypt Sol Ring opening hand now because Crypt is gone. This is not me saying that Sol Ring is worse than these cards. It's definitely up there. I'd say it's as good as all of them. I think Dockside is the only one of these ones, maybe Lotus, that has a more explosive, sort of powerful sudden effect. Sol Ring is better over the course of multiple turns, of course, because you can tap it multiple times, but a Dockside without a loop can still blow a game wide open, and with a loop it's obviously better. So I think Sol Ring is incredibly powerful, but I'm also okay with it being playable somewhere outside of Vintage. I think Commander is a good home for it. I think lowering the critical mass of fast mana is a good thing. I've also seen people asking about Mox Amber and Mox Diamond and the other fast mana cards that are often banned out of formats that don't have access to fast mana. These cards, things like Grim Monolith as well, are all very, very strong. But I point you towards Legacy, where all of these cards are legal, where Crypt and Sol Ring are not, and it's for good reason. These cards require hoops to jump through or card disadvantage to get online, and they still provide less mana than a Crypt or a Sol Ring. If Crypt and Sol Ring are S tier rocks, like the best ever printed, and I might even do a tier list on this, I've been talking about this today on my Discord, then these cards here are in the B tier. I'd actually push Grim Monolith down into C tier potentially, depending on whether you're in a format with something that can really abuse it, whether you've got easy access to Voltaic, Key off of Veneza's Saga, or Tolarian Academy changes things. But that's a different video. Either way, these cards are not even remotely on the same power level as the S tier shit we're talking about getting banned today. So ultimately, I understand the bans, but there's a few caveats to that. I do kind of wish we had a hands-off or hands-on approach and not the in-between. I think all of these are reasonable bans, but the question is, like, there are other things that might need to be looked at. Again, I don't think it's the fast mana I just mentioned or Gaia's Cradle. I actually point to things like Smothering Tide and Ristic Study as cards that might be considerable auto-includes for every deck that can play them that might need to hit onto this list. Smothering Tide is probably a good example of a card that you launch to into the mid-game that buries your opponents in advantage off of your fast mana. And on top of that, not only is there this hands-off, hands-on approach, but there's just like the timing of it all as well. Why is it taking them 4+ years to ban some of this stuff when it was egregious and a problem in the first place? And on top of all that, these cards are $100 each, give or take, right? They average out like $130 between the 3 different price points. Like, look, I'm not saying that cards that are expensive can't be banned or removed from a format because they're too good. Of course, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that the confidence from your player base and the feelings of resentment and frustration from your player base are going to mount significantly when you start banning out cards that they've bought with real world money or traded into like this. In many ways, the problem isn't that they were banned. The problem is they ever got to this price in the first place. And that comes from two sort of combined factors. The first is that these cards were just not reprinted enough. Both Dockside and Jel Lotus could have been in multiple products that they just weren't. Famously, the biggest one on my channel was that Dockside wasn't in Battle of Baldur's Gate, and it absolutely should have been. They should have had 2 to 3 reprints since it was printed, more than it has. There was no reason for this being $80 other than it being kept as a chase card and equity further down the line for them to reprint stuff and make people chase stuff in boosters. And the same is for Lotus as well. This was just kept as equity to sell the next Commander Masters product. On that note, I can't imagine Wizards of the Coast are happy seeing $300 to $400 worth of equity go down the drain. And when I say reprint equity, what I mean is cards that they can use to make you want to buy packs later on the off chance that you open them. Now, Dockside and Jel Lotus, Dockside is still does things in other formats. Jel Lotus does literally nothing in any format where there's not a commander, which is basically only Commander and Commander Cube and Brawl, I guess, right? So Jel Lotus is now literally a mana rock that does nothing. Although someone in the comment section is going to tell me that you can actually put the mana in the pool and then you can double it with like doubling Cube, and the mana that comes into the pool that's double from it doesn't have the same restriction. I know, I did a whole video on that. I might link that in the cards if you want to see me play Jel Lotus and Legacy. But the point is, these cards can't be used to sell packs anymore. I cannot imagine this option, this what's happened today was okayed by Wizards, or was making the people in charge of the reprint equity and how they make people chase products and boosters. They were not happy with this, I'm sure. And that's the funny thing, right? If the rules committee does nothing, people complain they're not doing enough, that they kiss the ass of Wizards of the Coast. They do this, they're going to get hammered by Wizards of the Coast and upset all the players that don't want their expensive cards banned out either. But on top of all that, let's look at Lotus for a second. It's not just the reprints that are the problem. The problem is that this never should have been printed in the first place. This is the most egregious, disgusting example of design for Commander cards that have ever existed. I've largely just ignored the card's existence. I talked quite a bit about it when it first got printed. Pretty sure I was kind of negative on it then. I did the meme where I played it in Legacy, and then I just forgot about it. I was never buying it, I was never trading for it, I didn't want to play with it, I didn't want to play against it. This card is so obviously like tuned and pointed directly at becoming an expensive staple for the super supposedly casual format, but being a explosive mana rock that pushes people's decks that are even the most casual to being at least some sort of powered up. It's gross. We shouldn't get to a stage where we have to ban out $100 cards because A, they should be reprinted to the point that they're cheaper, but B, we shouldn't be printing stuff this power crept and tuned and focused like a laser pointer to break open Commander or to monetize Commander through chaseable rares like this shit. Like, I have my own issues with cards like Smothered Tithe that I've already mentioned, for example, a card that I play in at least 3 different decks that I'm taking to Command Fest this weekend. But those Smothered Tithe doesn't even begin to become what Jel Lotus is in terms of pinpoint the most obnoxious shit you can for Commander. I think the idea of having a Lotus that's only usable on a Commander is cute and quaint, but I think it should have been left in the cute and quaint drawer and never made its way into being a physical card that's used to shift booster product and now is banned, upsetting a lot of people. And let's talk about the upset for a moment. I think it's justified to an extent. If you spend time, money, resources to trade into this kind of stuff, you don't want it banned out from under you. That's an obvious thing. Back in the day when Splinterton was banned, I had friends and viewers of the channel, because I was making content back then, saying that they had lost so much money because of it. And my argument was, nah, the rest of the cards in the deck, the Snapcasters and the Scalding Tarns and the Steam Vents, all hold their value. Funny, really, because Snapcaster Mage doesn't really hold its value anymore. A lot of those old staples don't. And that's true of all the other cards in the CDH decks and the high-powered decks. And also, this is just a CDH issue. There are a lot of casual players that randomly play with Crypts and Lotuses that they opened, okay? Let's not pretend casuals didn't play these cards. That is an absolute not true statement. But the point is, these cards were the big value cards. In the example of Twin, they lost a playset of a thing and everything else was good, they could pivot. In this example, you are losing hundreds of dollars or $100 per card banned out. There are CDH players in my mentions on Twitter showing off that they own 3 Lotuses, 3 Docksides, multiple Crypts, and they've lost so much money. I feel really bad. Really bad for stores. I'm not talking about the investment fucking MTG finance bros. I don't give a fuck about them. I care about local game stores, online retailers, and the secondary market that is a part of the Magic ecosystem, and how those people will have inventory that overnight tonight is losing hundreds, maybe even thousands or tens of thousands of dollars worth of value because Lotus is going to go from $100 to near zero overnight. I think Crypt will hold some. It's playable in Vintage, which is not a big draw, but it's also got a price memory and some prestige to it. It's also like more of a cube card than the other two as well. So I think Crypt will hold some sort of price memory, but Dockside and Jel Lotus are just plummeting to the ground. And again, I'm not somebody who's precious about keeping the value of collections huge and high. I just think that when you push a format off the back of chase cards like this, when you put them out there, you design them, you create them, and you don't reprint them, you let them climb in price and allow them to exist in a way that suggests that these are the pinnacle of power level for a format, and then they just get banned out, that is a rough feeling for any casual or invested player. What you've got to remember is that although this is almost certainly a positive for how games of Commander will feel when playing with strangers or your established playgroup, you've got to remember that the expensive cards from Commander are probably the expensive cards that more people own or aspire to have than the expensive cards in other formats. And I mean that, right? People buy duels these days to play Commander, people buy Jel Lotuses and Crypts to play Commander, and Commander is the forefront and face of your fucking game. To have those people stung really fucking hard as they've, saved up, traded up, just spent the time and energy to get these cards is a problem. You're going to piss off a lot of people. You're going to make a lot of people pro-proxy at that point. A lot of people are going to throw a lot of shit at the rules committee. I don't think they're 100% without blame because of how blindsided this was. The lack of action over, 4 years on some of these cards, or Mana Crypt is like decades, right? And also like the lack of a watch list or a warning coming up. Like no one saw this coming, myself included. I never thought this was going to happen today. I thought maybe Docs ought to get banned at some point. I think we see it go with Lotus and Crypt on the same day. That's insane. So there's a small amount of blame there. But really, They're wrangling with a beast that has been constructed out of mistake after mistake after mistake from Wizards of the Coast, of putting directly into Commander, of putting in only pre and price products, of not reprinting it when they should have done. All of those things have built this fucking mess of a molehill we've got here, and it's the rules committee that, I've really fucked this analogy up, it's the rules committee that are trying to seal the top of that molehill with some bans. You get what I'm saying, right? For the love of God, don't abuse people over this. That should go without saying, but I'm just going to say it because I've seen how angry people have got online. But I actually understand your anger, and I think we are just dealing with a cascading cavalcade of fuck-ups when it comes to the management of Commander as a format. And it began with printing shit like Jel Lotus. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I've been Vince from PleasantKenobi on the internet. If you're buying anything for Commander, if you're still buying cards, not proxying everything, then go to coolstuffinc.com, get 5% off the order, help support the show. Link in the description below. And I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.